Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation. Harmon, the Canucks need a center, a top 6 center this offseason. We've talked about it quite a bit. Jim Rutherford's got a solution that not only gets them a top 6 center, keeps Quinn Hughes in Vancouver. Technical producer Jacob Lazar cues it up right away. Let's just hear the answer. It's just all-encompassing answer right off the top here.
I think the greatest fear for Canuck fans here is 2 years from now. Quinn Hughes can become an unrestricted free agent. How cognizant are you with the moves that you're going to be making this summer and within these next 2 years? Do you consult with Quinn? Do you let him know what the game plan is? And when do you start thinking about an extension for Quinn Hughes? Because I think that'd be one loss with this franchise. I don't know if you'd ever bounce back if he was to leave here.
Totally agree, 100%. The one thing that we will be sure of, that we will have enough cap space to offer him the kind of contract that he deserves. That's the one thing we can prepare for. And it may not boil down to money with him. You know, he said before he wants to play with his brothers. And that would be partly out of our control, in our control, if we brought his brothers here. So there's many moving parts here. Agree 100%. This franchise cannot afford to lose a guy like Quinn Hughes. And we will do everything we can to keep him here, but at the end of the day, it'll be his decision.
There you go. There's your answer.
Full disclosure, as soon as Jim said in our control if we acquire both his brothers, Trance and I looked at each other and I couldn't help but crack up live at the press conference. That was so wild. That was so out of pocket.
It was so unprompted. Like, it was just like, hey, we're going to... First of all, no one even brought up the idea of Quinn wanting to play with his brothers. Had Quinn publicly said that before? That he wants to play with his brothers?
I think in an article years ago with Trance, I can't remember the direct quote, but he's in some way publicly, yes, referenced how much fun it'd be to play with his brothers. But again, that was years ago.
He was talking about the international tournaments too.
And there hasn't been a bombshell quote Quinn has given about how appealing it'd be to play with his brothers. Jim just kind of said the quiet part out loud that a lot of Canucks fans have been thinking, and it's not hard to put 2 and 2 together.
No. So Tyson Carter in our chat said incoming quad saying Jack and Luke for Ratu, Jet Wu, and a conditional 5th. No, it's going to take a lot more than that. And now we have a lot of content. We're going to get to that a lot later. Management spoke today. We've got to get into it all. Kind of a cold open today, but this is Canucks Conversation. That's Harmon Dial. I'm Dave Gujarelli, and this show is brought to you by Bet365.
Can I say, by the way, I just love Jim Rutherford press conferences because I'm always here for the chaos.
I don't know why anyone asked Patrik a question. No disrespect to Patrik Allvin, but we hear from Jim like twice a year, training camp and this day. I don't know why anyone burned a question on Patrik Allvin. We hear from him more often. We never hear anything of substance. So there you go. Like, you had Jim Rutherford. I don't know why anyone would ask a question to Patrik Allvin today. It should have just been a Jim Rutherford press conference.
Seriously.
He gave us more gold, too. He gave us a lot of gold. Where do you want to start? We've got so much. We talked about the Hughes thing. I don't think we need to dive into that anymore. The center, I think that transitions pretty well. He talked about their need for going out and getting a center this offseason and how that's going to be hard to do. They feel comfortable with their goaltending. They feel comfortable with their defense, but they want to go get a center. The interesting thing that he said to me, and I don't think we're going to play the clip of this, but the interesting thing that I really picked up on was him saying we need to figure out our centers and then we can figure out wingers. They've got a lot of wingers right now, and I've been saying for a while now, Connor Garland's eligible for an extension on July 1st. It's not a Quinn Hughes situation where it's like, oh, you either extend him or you trade him. But I do wonder about a guy like Connor Garland, if he has any value after the year that he just had. And really, he's established himself as a really steady 50-point player, capable of driving his own third line. If there's value in Connor Garland on the trade market, like, of course I could see them making a trade involving Connor Garland to free up some cap space and, again, go get that center that they need.
Perhaps, but he's not going to have a ton of value, and especially, I think it's a different conversation if Tocchet doesn't want to come back, because Garland is a Tocchet favorite.
Yeah.
Look at how many minutes Garland got this season, how his usage skyrocketed. If Tocchet is back, I think they're less likely to dangle Garland as a chip that could open up cap space for them. And frankly, as well, they just need more good forwards, period. And so to me, if you include him in a package to get a centerman, now it isn't just, oh, you've added the center. You've then only, if you're sending Garland out, you've kind of upgraded.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I'd rather have Garland and add a top flight center to this team, because Garland is still one of their best players. And look, on a contending team, he's probably a middle six forward. I don't ideally want him to be an 18, 19, 20 minute a player game. I don't want him to ideally be on a top unit power play, but I still want him on this roster. I mean, let's not forget how impactful he was in the playoffs last year. Game 7 against round 2 against the Oilers, he was arguably the only forward that actually had juice and buzz in his game, which quiets the concerns about, oh, he's a smaller guy, is he going to thrive in a playoff type environment? I still want to see Connor Garland part of this team next year, to be totally honest with you.
There's so much to get to. Patrik Johnston's going to join us in a few minutes here to help us break it all down. There's Rick Tocchet. There was a lot of conversation about Elias Pettersson. But I think before we get to PJ, because we're going to focus on a couple other things with PJ as well, let's just hear the quote that Rutherford had on Rick Tocchet. His contract, how the Canucks have offered him a new contract that would make him the highest paid coach in Canucks history. And really, I think the most important thing here, that the Canucks will not exercise that team option. A thing that we always said was going to be not a great move if they did it. Again, they used it kind of as a bargaining chip. They dangled it out there a little bit, and it got reported by a few different people that the Canucks would be doing that. Jim Rutherford saying the Canucks will not do that. Here's the clip. Not yet. Not yet. We'll get it soon. Very soon. What did he say? I can't remember.
And,
basically what I just said.
I know
not exercising the team option on Tocchet.
Every year or during the year, there's always issues being talked about what the coaches want the general manager to get for them and how he wants to play and all that. I believe that communication's been good this year, and it's even been better since the season's ended, because I've actually sat in a couple of those meetings, and it's been a really good dialogue, okay? We will not exercise the team option for him to stay. We don't feel it's right to have somebody here that may have his mind somewhere else. And I'd say that about anybody. This is not just about talk. But we believe that, and I believe that Tocchet and his coaching staff did as good a job coaching this team this year as they did the year before when he was coach of the year. Now, he was dealt a totally different hand this year. When the team won the division, it was a lot of good work by him, a lot of good work by the players, but everything went right. This year, we've talked enough about, the incident that happened and affected the chemistry of the room and affected the play of the team in the first half and forced a trade. But with all that going on, how he handled the situation and how he handled the team was really good. So I give him and his staff kudos for the job they did this year. As for his contract, we've gone through a process we've negotiated. I would suspect sometime this week he'll have a decision. We have gone a long ways from where coaches have been compensated with the Canucks for years, forever actually, and we're hoping that he takes that contract and stays.
Hoping that he takes that contract and stays. Hope. He said this week that they might get a decision from Tocchet, but the ball seems very, very firmly in Rick Tocchet's court right now.
And that was a huge endorsement, saying that he believes that Tocchet has done as good a job this year as he did last year when he was obviously the Jack Adams winner. You can disagree with that assessment all you want, but that's what the organization believes. We know that Quinn Hughes wants Rick Tocchet back. So It's like you said, the ball is very much in Tocchet's court now, and this is his decision to make. And ultimately, I agree that as much as they want him back, it would not be the right move to bring him back on a club option unless he's fully invested and fully committed to wanting to be in Vancouver. You just can't afford another distraction, another storyline like that playing out.
Okay, let's get to PJ. I want to talk to him about the practice facility, Tom Willander as well. Few things to get into. Let's get to PJ, who's brought to you by our friends over at Greta Bar YVR, the home of our electric watch parties and our off-season spot to chill. Greta's a great spot for all games, whether that's hockey or baseball. Come out, have a good time with the street food menu, the arcade games, and the bar as well. It's a really, really good time. That football machine, I keep talking about it. Farhan and I were talking today about that. I'm going to keep that conversation private, but yeah, I don't know. I can throw a football, just for the record. I can spin it pretty well. Not going to lie. But anyways, Greta Bar YVR, great spot to be. Come out, have a good time. Make sure you're 19 plus. We've had that recently. A couple people say, I went to Greta because you guys told me to, but I'm 17. And they didn't let me in. So I should say, you have to be 19 to get into Greta. So go out, have a good time. Greta's a great time. All right, Patrik Johnston, who's able to go to Greta, has been to Greta before as well. PJ joins us now. PJ, what was your main takeaway from today's presser with management?
Well, that you need to be you get ID'd every time you go to Greta. That was my main takeaway. Do you know how to throw a football? Are you sure?
Oh, don't start. You know I can too.
I know you can. You know how to throw lots of stuff. My main takeaway, man, there was a lot of stuff in there, wasn't there? It was, I found myself sitting there as Rutherford kind of gave his opening statement, and then the first kind of couple answers, and the way he was handling it, and it was very much like, okay, this is Jim Rutherford. Like this is his team. The idea of sort of that he was going to slide into this sort of president emeritus. Allvin was going to. This is no, we're not anywhere near that. Like this is a guy I've run hockey teams. I've done these things. I've been a champion. I am going to make this group a champion. I mean, we heard in his quote about the Tocchet, we believe, I believe, right? He said, we believe, and then corrected himself, says, I believe, right? He put his stamp on that moment. So that was sort of a big thing for me. Obviously, the uncertainty now, we can clearly see they're not going to bring a guy back who doesn't want to be here. So here's the offer that's there. That essentially he has negotiated what he believes is a fair contract for him. I thought that was, and highlighted this will be an unprecedented contract. Like this is more than anyone's ever made to coach here. He kind of underlined that. And then the Pettersson stuff, which you sit back and I think all of us were thinking, and Daniel Wagner and him kind of dealt like, listen, there is so much stuff that Pettersson does that is exactly what you're talking about in terms of execution. So what else does he need to be? And it clearly is, I think, they didn't really get into this one particular thing. We talked so much about preparation, and we heard Allvin push back on sort of Pettersson's talk about injury and all that kind of stuff, saying you just got to persevere, man. It was a talk about character and like who you're going to be and what you present yourself to everybody else and to your teammates and how you deal with the challenges in front of you. And certainly, and Harmon and I have talked a lot about this. One of the things I really think was part of his story. Sure, yeah, he didn't have a great offseason. Yes, he came in and it wasn't testing well. But the consequence of that is what teams have figured out about him. And he did nod at that a little bit. When I asked, basically, as a team, what happened? Why couldn't you guys get to the middle of the ice? And he nodded a little bit. He was very careful in how he answered his stuff on Friday, but he still said that essentially teams have scouted us out. And that is certainly, I think, something that they are trying to press home to him. Said, listen, you have done all these things. You have achieved quite a bit. But the problem is that the league is constantly adapting and you need to do more to get back to be the guy that you have been. And now that's, basically gauntlet is on him. So that was my main takeaway, was sort of looking at how much that, it is all about that. It's no surprise. That's what they wanted to talk about because that was the core essentially of what the statement was. But yeah, this is Jim Rutherford's team. That more than anything is what stood out to me.
On PD, do you think they should trade him? Like, seriously, we're talking about a star player And they're talking about, yeah, he just needs to work hard. This is the highest paid player in your franchise's history in year 2, and they're talking about him like he's this 17-year-old kid or 18-year-old kid that they just drafted that they're hoping can figure it out. Like, it just feels weird.
Yeah, and you know, Bruff with the question, has it been hard getting through it to him? Like, Jason nailed it. Like, we can say all these things, and we asked Rick the other day, essentially, how do you know that PD knows this? And you know, that's an observation. That's someone I spend a lot of time talking to. I got a message from someone who pays attention to this stuff, and I said, you know, I noted that. I said, is he listening? Is it hard to get the message through? And he basically this is a person who studies organizations and organizational behavior and looks at the sort of the people in groups, especially when you have stars like this in this kind of scenario. And he goes, this is the whole thing. A fatal flaw is a lack of self-awareness. You just can't overcome it. I've seen it many times in these kinds of situations. Best case is you carve out a silo for the person to exist and lets them max their niche capability, but you limit their influence, right? And like, excuse me, allergies. I've got all this extra stuff. No, but you look at like, what is the dynamic of the group, right? And in many ways, that's why they removed JT Miller. Like, they as good as he was for the team, and he had been, it was unrecoverable. It's clear. And was there any other way? You know, I put that to a couple of, you know, I put that to Tocchet the other day, and he's not sure there was. We put that to Allvin, which, you know, the implication would be trade P to keep Miller, and it just seems like we've gone too far down the track for the whole situation. So, can you keep Pettersson? I mean, the way they're talking about it, they're talking like they have to, and they kind of do, because if you do, this is like Rutherford used the word, we're now a team in transition, right? If they move him, obviously you're hoping it's a big deal, but it's still pretty tough to pull off. And what are you bringing in? And it's a real reset of where you're at. And I'm not sure. I mean, it's one thing. The only thing that'd be more challenging to replace, and that is probably possible if you move Quinn Hughes. Like, but Pettersson has not performed, so they need to solve that problem. And whether that's a trade, which they would not be wrong to do, or that's something else, motivation, I don't know what it is. They're going to have to figure something.
PJ, what do you make of the Tom Willander situation? Allvin saying that as of now, his camp's intention is for Willander to go back for a third year at BU, which was really surprising to me. First of all, do you buy that they're serious with that threat? Because one thing I've been wondering is there's still a lot of time before the start of next season, and the way I look at it is, watching Willander at BU, to me, there's nothing left for him to accomplish at that level. He is pro ready 100%, very possibly NHL ready by this fall. And the most important part, he'd be foregoing, if he spends most of next year in the NHL and he signed, he'd be foregoing nearly $1 million by not signing and going back to BU. Do you buy that as a realistic possibility of how this is playing out, or do you think this is more of a negotiation ploy on his camp's part?
Well, as I reported earlier, it's down to Schedule A bonuses, right? Like, I think we've heard that. I think that's been reported elsewhere. And so for that to be a sticking point is really weird. That basically the player is ready to go. We can see it. I mean, the challenge is he needs to make the next step, right? And the sort of development curve he's on is one that makes sense. So for him not to be signed and for them to be down to the idea of the sort of bonus structure in his contract is very odd. And it keeps me coming back to something I thought of immediately when we first realized things were off the rails a couple weeks ago. That is, are they just going to trade him? I mean, they talked about trade, right? They know that they're probably not going to be able to sign a free agent to solve their forward problem, right? That what they need to do is that they need to look at the few assets they have, and one of the few things of value is Willander, and the way their defense core has now evolved, the way they added Marcus Pettersson, the emergence of Junior Pettersson, they still have high hopes for Victor Mancini. I think we all know that he is much more of a project than they have been publicly talking about, but certainly the hope there that they find a way forward with the group they have. Willander doesn't have to be in that. Now, I think they would be smart to keep him in there because the value is there in terms of contract, and not just for what you're noting, Harm, that he himself is dropping his earning power, but the efficiency of having a contract like that in your cap, with a player contributing in the way they believe he can contribute, like, it's hard to ignore that. But the truth is, they need a forward. They need a real forward, and the kind of forward that you can get by shipping out a top-end prospect. And Willander is still seen as a top-end prospect. Like, that's the other truth. He may have some flaws in his game, may play a noisy game, but the truth is that this is a guy that is going to be an NHL defenseman. So what can you get for him? How can you reset things here? So that's where I'm kind of at. You're never going to get them to admit that, of course, but I do think that this is a guy they're looking at saying, I think this is going to be part of our sort of solution to this trade problem that we're facing with finding a forward. I
agree with you. Patrik, as the only other person in the market that really cares about the practice facility, it seems.
Take a break.
What did you think of Jim's answer today? Because obviously you and I talked about this. We were sitting next to each other. We both found it very interesting that he kind of got rid of the idea of partnering with local rinks and that they're just going to have to put a shovel in the ground and build something themselves.
Well, I mean, there's many different thoughts. Like, certainly, part of me got thinking about that again. I mean, the fact that we are pushing on it wasn't so much today. To me, I wasn't pushing on it so much, but what the hell's a training facility? Because we know the answer, which is nowhere. It was more about this comment about, well, Petey's got to work out. Petey's got to do this. I'm like, I had someone point out to me, okay, so if he's sticking around, where is he skating? Like, that ice in Rogers Arena doesn't stay all summer. Mm-hmm. There's only 2 rinks in the city proper that have ice over the summer. Like, there's just, and they're already booked out. So what do we, and so you're sitting there going, well, what the hell? Like, this continues to be, this is a team now that stands out in the league. Calgary is going to have one. Like, Calgary has more of a permanent setup even now than the Canucks do. So certainly the dream has long been that they would add somewhere. And certainly I think our assumption has always been most likely that would be UBC, but obviously things have, there's a stall there. They've hunted around. I mean, I think we've all heard sort of noise, or I don't know if we all have, but I've heard noises of where they've looked at. They've talked about there's land out by the airport. They've talked to you and I both obviously poked away at the SFU question, right? They've mentioned public facilities. I think that means the Richmond Oval.
Can I quickly interject?
Yeah.
What about this BCIT idea?
Well, no. Sorry. Did you understand what that actually is?
Yes.
There's an open plot of land near the airport. BCIT is set up at the airport, not BCIT in Burnaby.
Hold on. Okay, I'm gonna have to text you about this.
But you may or may not know, Babe, but BCIT, their aircraft maintenance program, is in that building across the street. So there's a plot of land there.
Across the street from the BCIT Burnaby campus. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, that's not happening.
Okay, I'll text you.
No, that's not happening.
Continue your answer. Sorry for interrupting.
It's okay. Anyway, they've come back to, well, there's a couple of pieces of land we're looking at. And you're like, okay, yeah, go for it. Like, that's going to cost you money. It's funny, I obviously started on this train years ago looking at when the originally we were talking about Plaza of Nations, and then that didn't happen. And of course, nothing's happened at the Plaza of Nations. So maybe the Canucks were right on that one. Nonetheless, it stands out. And like you talk about wanting to help your players be the best they can be. Well, now the Canucks are the only team in the NHL that doesn't have a permanent training facility, at least, or doesn't have plans for one. And it speaks to all of that. And that was kind of how I was trying to frame it. Like, listen, you guys are asking him to raise the bar. When are you going to raise the bar? And they got to get it done. It's pretty simple. They got to get it done. And if they are going to be the team that they claim they aspire to be, you got to put money on the table. And that's been something this organization, for whatever reason, in recent years has been reluctant to do.
I also laughed that Jim said, it'll get done. I may not be on Earth by the time it gets done, but it'll eventually happen. I thought that was really frustrating and really telling as far as how frustrating it must be for management, because their hands are kind of tied. There's only so much they can do. This is beyond their pay grade, and a lot of it comes down to ownership and what they're willing to spend and invest. To pivot back to Rick Tocchet, what have you heard about that situation? What exactly do you think he's weighing right now in making his decision of whether to return as head coach of the Vancouver Canucks? And how would you weigh the odds of him ultimately being behind the bench come October?
Well, I think I've been rating it as sort of 60-40 no. But it's not, nothing's impossible. Like, it's very much in that nothing's impossible, but also, here's a guy who's very well regarded. And it was no mistake that Rutherford mentioned him being coach of the year last year. He knows what this guy's interest level is, or what other teams, I should say, will have in him. And, but like, as Jim himself, or Rick himself said, I mean, I the headline I wrote out of it was Rick Tocchet's taking a breath, considering his Canucks future, right? Of course, I want to be back, but there's a process you have to go through. And he is looking at things like, what is this team going to be? Where's the structure? What is the plan? He insists, I have a ton of faith in Patrik Allvin and what he's been able to deliver. There's also an element of what he hasn't been able to deliver. I go back to that trade deadline. Like, they couldn't find a dance partner, or wouldn't accept whatever offers were there for Brock Besser. It wasn't quite what they were looking for. They were hoping, they know they need to reset their lineup. Like, they're open about that. And their hand being forced on the Miller situation, they rolled a little bit out of that. I think they're right. I think their defense core is trending better, but they still need to score goals, and they're without a guy that does that, and their other guy wasn't playing very well, and they need to find their way out of that. The Besser situation, I mean, they're really going to walk in. They had a guy that, Dave and I know this, they were stuff available for them to get, and obviously the situation was more fluid and more complex than they wanted it to be, but they didn't get anything in the end, and now he's going to leave probably. So, there is an element of, okay, what are you going to deliver here now? And so I think that's very much on the table. We joke about the practice facility and whatever, but like, what are the plans in terms of the overall, sort of away from the front window spending on this team, right? And that's certainly been a question mark, I think, for a while. They upgraded the areas and spaces around the dressing room. That's great. That's what the players want. They put some money into upgrades in the building, but they still need new seats. I mean, that was Jim Rutherford's talking point when I asked him about ticket prices. He said, listen, there's lots of stuff they're doing in this building. We're going to upgrade the building. And I'm like, it's nice, but you're doing two things. You're providing a fan experience. You should be trying to build relationships with your fans. And most importantly, you're trying to make sure your players are optimized in their efforts to win hockey games, which is what people want to see. And so I think, you're looking at the whole overall package if you're Rick Tocchet, and you've obviously been here for a couple of years. You've learned a lot. You've seen a lot. You have a good sense of how things work here, what people want. I do think he actually enjoys that part of it. It's a hockey market. He's always been a sociable guy, going back to when he was a player, wherever he was, especially I think in Philly, because he's most associated with there. But anywhere he went, this is a guy that loves talking hockey, loves meeting with people. So from that standpoint, I think he likes it. But it comes back to, what's the plan? What's my team going to look like next year? How are we going to recover from this disastrous season? And in the end, does he believe in it?
PJ, thanks so much for taking the time today. Really
Pleasure,
appreciate
guys.
you joining us.
Have a great show. Have a good time tossing the football around.
Thank you. There he is, Patrik Johnston of the Province. Yeah, a lot of stuff to get to there. The Willander thing, let's start there. I think PJ summed it up well. I don't buy it, but I do buy it, I guess, because it seems like everyone's saying that he's going back to college, that Tom Willander's going to go back to college over Schedule A bonuses, which is just crazy. And ultimately, I think he just has to get traded, I think. Like, if it actually comes down to, okay, he's going to play college, which, by the way, means if he just does that again, he just becomes a free agent and he can do the Adam Fox thing. And then what do you get in a trade, right? Whereas if you do it now to a team that's just going to want to pay him the Schedule A bonuses or whatever it is, right? There's a lot more value in that right now. To me, I think I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, they have to trade Tom Willander, but I think if it comes down to that, where I'm either going to go back to college or not, I'm not going to sign with your team, I think that's probably what I would end up doing.
Well, two things. I think first and foremost, that is a big if, though. Again, still, the whole idea of going back to college, if he's serious about that and that isn't just a negotiating ploy, then yes, I'd be pretty worried about the relationship between him and the team. And for the reasons you outlined, you're probably looking at him as a centerpiece to go out and get that centerman on the trade market that you're hunting for. And also, secondly, even before the uncertainty around whether Willander's going to sign or not, we spoke openly about they're probably going to have to trade one of DPD or Willander in order to get that centerman they need, because you got to give to get. And because this organization did not sell at the deadline and accrue extra picks and prospects that they could then leverage this summer, what else do the Canucks really have that you could leverage as a centerpiece to go out and get the centerman you need, outside of obviously your first round draft picks?
The answer's not much.
So even before this Willander saga and the uncertainty around, is he going to go back to college? The difficulties around, can you get him signed? In my mind, that was already something the Canucks would have had to consider, is your blue line with Quinn, Hronek, Marcus Pettersson has a solid core and foundation in place. You don't have many other coveted assets. As hard as it is, you may have to look at the pipeline of D you have to service your needs up front. And now that you have this complication around Willander's status, it probably enhances the odds of him being a potential trade chip. But again, there's still a lot of time before next season starts. Players can change their mind. And to me, again, I'm putting myself in Willander's shoes. It'd be a lot of money to potentially turn down to go back to college for another year, when in terms of your earning power and even just for pure hockey development, that is not the best decision for him. And so I wonder if part of this is still hardball negotiating.
Let's get to our poll question. Our poll question is brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. The Vancouver Canadians are back on the road this week with 6 games in Everett. They're back at the Nat on Tuesday, April 29th for a homestand versus Hillsborough. Check out the Nooner at the Nat on Friday, May 2nd. A great excuse to get the weekend started early. Check out the White Spot Family Fun Sunday on May 4th. Kids can run the bases postgame. And hey, May the 4th be with you. It's Star Wars Day at the Nat. For tickets, call 604-872-5232 or check out CanadiansBaseball.com. All right, our poll question. After today's press conference from management, do you feel better or worse? 55.3% of people say worse, 30.9% say unchanged, 13.9% say better. Harman, I'm somewhere between worse and unchanged.
Yeah, I'm mostly unchanged. The Willander development and the possibility of him returning to college is not a great development. I didn't expect the Willander update to be
so direct
and so potentially concerning here.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's largely unchanged for me. In my mind, Jim has always been a straight shooter. And again, in this press conference, he was pretty honest, transparent, and frank about a lot of the uncertainty and challenges they're facing on Tocchet's future, on the Willander front, even big picture as it relates to Quinn Hughes, the next contract for him, and openly saying the quiet part out loud about, he said he's wanted to play with his brothers, which I know it's been published earlier. I believe Jansen wrote an article 2 or 3 years ago now where he'd mentioned that, but that was years ago, and so it didn't get as much play, and there wasn't there's never really been a bombshell Quinn Hughes quote that's come out where fans have been really concerned that, he might leave to go play with his brothers. It's all sort of been us just putting 2 and 2 together and kind of using our logic. but Jim sort of said the quiet part out loud there, which again makes you a little bit more concerned if you're a Canucks fan.
It doesn't make me feel better. And that's the question. Do you feel better or worse?
I don't think you feel better coming out of this press conference. But honestly, I think a lot of this is just outside of the Willander thing, there wasn't a lot that was new or that internally I didn't already wonder or have some level of concern about.
Fair enough. One interesting thing he talked about, and we're going to get to the Miller Pettersson stuff in a second here, but Thatcher Demko. Sounds like both sides might be willing to sign an extension, and I'm saying this because I'm teasing it. We're going to talk about it on tomorrow's show, the reality of signing Thatcher Demko to an extension, because both sides seem to be pretty open to it. So we'll see. We'll workshop that.
We should
tomorrow.
also talk about, they fielded several questions about Pettersson, and I think there's some interesting meat to
that was
to
my
pick off
whole
that.
anyone else was just Pettersson. That's what I
Perfect.
had planned. But Miller Pettersson, I want to start with this.
Sure.
This is what Rutherford said about the Miller and Pettersson situation, which obviously ended with JT Miller getting traded.
Any more clarity on the unfortunate incident that you referred to? I mean, was there an incident? Was it kind of a relationship? Was there any more to it that you can share?
Yeah, well, yeah, there was lots to it, and unfortunately, I'm not going to share it. I think a lot of things were personal. I don't believe that it was just down to two people. It filtered into the whole team, or most of the team, and affected the chemistry of our team. I do think that in a lot of ways, JT tried hard to help fix the situation. A lot of people in our organization worked on it. We had hoped that it could get back to where it was a year ago, because the same two players played a year ago and both had good years, and the team won the division. And so over probably a month or so, that was the hope of everybody. But to get into details of everything and what people were thinking, I don't think it's fair to the players. As you know, JT took a leave of absence at one point in time. I will say, give you a little bit more information so you understand the process, because of course, like anything, everybody wants everything to happen today, right away. This was a situation that wasn't as easy to resolve in a matter of a day or a week. But when we got to the point that everybody in the organization felt that it wasn't going to be resolved, we had to look at what all the options were. We approached JT about would he consider going to another team, and at that point he said he would. And then as a little time passed by, JT was getting anxious, and he wanted to make it very clear that he did want to be traded, and he would waive his right, his no trade to go to the New York Rangers. And so at that point, then everything was moving forward. But it wasn't just about trading him. All options were on the table, and I have the utmost respect for JT as a person and as a player, and I wish him well.
Again, Jim Rutherford kind of sharing that JT didn't request a trade, but that second part of the answer where he said started to get a little anxious, I think the pressure from Miller to get traded ramped up as the season went along.
Absolutely. And in discussing the season as a whole, it was telling to me, and it really stood out, that Rutherford in his opening statement immediately brought up the Pettersson-Miller feud. He didn't spend extended time talking about injuries and this went wrong, that went wrong. He essentially went, season was really disappointing, and brought this up, insinuating that it was the biggest thing that derailed their season, which I thought was really interesting, especially since he noted that it wasn't just between those two, that it filtered into and affected nearly the entire team's chemistry, which suggests this was maybe even deeper and more serious than we thought.
And we don't know what that means, and he's not going to dive into it more. He opens up a lot, but he even said he can't go further into that. So,
In having said that, in that opening statement, I still would have liked to see management take more accountability and responsibility.
the question I wanted to ask, didn't get the chance to ask it, was you talked about fixing the blue line, but not so much about why the blue line needed fixing. Did you learn anything in the last offseason just about how you construct your blue line? Because again, we talk about this idea that, oh yeah, they thought Tocchet and Adam Foote would be able to turn Vinny Desharnais around just like they turned Tyler Myers around. Didn't work. They walk away from Nikita Zadorov. Let's not even add that into the conversation, but the blue line needed fixing because they didn't construct it properly in the offseason, and that was a big reason for them not winning games to start the year.
Undoubtedly, fully agree there. And again, it's hard to rip on them too much for it because they weren't directly asked about it. It'd be different if you had that opportunity to ask it and they kind of danced around it. But still, overall, in that opening statement, I would have liked to see a bit more accountability and responsibility on what part they played in this season being so disappointing.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Anyone else is all Pettersson. Let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by our friends at Pacific Toyota Dealers. We want to tell you about the 100% electric Toyota BZ4X, an SUV packed with plenty of space. The BZ4X can handle any terrain and can take you from the city to the slopes. It's backed by the peace of mind that comes with knowing you're driving a Toyota, and if you're driving a BZ4X, you get access to HOV lanes, even if you're driving alone. When you choose the BZ4X, you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives, and now you can finance a 2025 BZ4X from 0.99% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. Okay, I don't know which Pettersson quote I want to hear first. I really don't know if I can pick, but I would say the one that I'll paraphrase instead of playing it is the one where Patrik Allvin said, well, we have some good news. It's a baby step, but Pettersson was in here working out, and he's been here the past 3 days. He was here Saturday, he was here Sunday, and he's been working out. He's been putting in the work for the past 3 days. It's a small step, but now he's got to do it all off season. I am sitting there in those gorgeous, comfortable chairs. Are we talking about the highest paid player in franchise history right now? Or are we talking about Olli Juolevi in 2018 or wherever it was? Like, what are we are we talking about Jake Virtanen at training camp not coming in shape? Like, what are we talking about here? This idea that practice habits and how much this is a conversation, it's really starting to bother me, Harm. Really starting to bother me.
Is there a player in the NHL in recent memory, star player, where habits, preparation, professionalism, being fully dialed in have been this large of a talking point, hammered publicly this often?
No, I can't think of another example. Someone tell me if I'm wrong, but no, I've never heard like a press conference, the general manager be like, good news, everyone, our star player lifted a dumbbell today. Like, it's starting to make me feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. It's not good, Harm. It's not good that this is the dialogue around Elias Pettersson right now.
Sure. I think a large part of it, though, is challenging him to take that next step.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've certainly done that.
When I step back and look at the overall commentary around Pettersson, my takeaway was clearly they don't love all of his qualities right now, and they seem to have some level of doubt right now about him being the guy on a cup winning team. But they also seem to have a realistic understanding that they lack true top of the lineup difference makers at the center ice position. And he's almost too talented to give up on this early. That's kind of the vibe and overall impression that I got stepping back and looking at everything they said about him. Sure, Allvin twice said that they're going to keep all their options open surrounding his future. But at the same time, it was striking to me, for example, when Ben Kuzma asked Jim Rutherford a question, Patrik Allvin a question about the desire to go out and look for a number one center, a true top flight number one center on the trade market. And Allvin pushed back against that idea and unprompted brought Pettersson up as, hey, he's a guy that has the talent and we believe he can rebound. I thought that was interesting and notable, pushing back against this idea that it has to be a number one center, since, you know, we already kind of have a potential one in Elias Pettersson right here. That's sort of my overall takeaway is they may not be in love with his character, his practice habits, and all those things, but they seem to understand and repeatedly brought up how talented he is numerous times, that I think they're in a position where I lean towards thinking that they're more likely to keep him than not.
I agree. They probably have to keep him. But man, the poll question of do you feel better or worse? Do you feel better or worse about Elias Pettersson and his situation after that press conference today? I think the answer is undoubtedly worse.
Well, not just this press conference, but Friday's presser.
Yeah. Oh, well, Friday we talked about that more than enough. I know it's Monday. Over the weekend, I found myself just randomly thinking like, wow, Harman asked him point blank, like, hey, your shot speed's down, your skating speed's down. Any theories? No. But I got to work on it. How? How are you going to work on it if you don't know what's going on? Drives me nuts. Like, you could have even just answered your question by saying, I just need to get stronger. Boom. Cliche, easy, but everyone would have accepted it. It's just, I don't know. I know media is not really his thing, and I don't want to harp on it too much, but yeah, it's not a good feeling that the Canucks look like they just have to keep Elias Pettersson right now.
There just wasn't enough, and we don't need to relitigate everything you talked about on Friday, but it wasn't so much. You could pick out some of the quotes that were tweeted and feel, okay, like he's kind of saying the right things, but being there in person, actually watching it, the body language, the tone, it just didn't give you, there wasn't actual weight and substance behind the words. There wasn't a ton of conviction behind it. That's what it was, sort of like a half-assed confidence in himself almost. And again, that doesn't mean, oh, he isn't going to be prepared come training camp, but ultimately it's going to be the actual work he puts in this summer that determines whether he bounces back. And I also thought it was interesting, this idea, and I'm not sure that everybody quite understood what management meant in the moment. I initially didn't, and I had to sort of think about it. But do you remember when Rutherford said Pettersson's always going to get his points, but it's about being a complete player? Two things. First, that tells me he didn't get his points this year. So if you're saying he's going to get his points, to me that's subtly indicated that, okay, I think they believe he's going to bounce back, at least point production-wise. Number one, which again sort of reinforces the theory that I think they're more likely than not to keep him just because they kind of have to, since they don't have any point per game caliber forwards. But secondly, when Rutherford talked about him needing to be a more complete player, I don't think it was necessarily in reference to, oh, he doesn't work hard enough defensively, or he doesn't play the game the right way. I think they were more talking about this idea of, can he be the best forward on a cup-winning team? Because when he was drafted had that Calder-winning season, followed it up with another strong sophomore campaign, and then obviously when he had the 102-point season, we all looked at him, and I certainly thought, oh yeah, this is a guy you can build your franchise around, that can be, that isn't just a guy who puts up a lot of points, but you can win a cup with this guy. Whereas now that's obviously come in question. And to me, the specific areas that I think they want to see growth out of him would be getting stronger on his feet so he's not knocked off the puck as much, developing that obsessive drive to get better, and developing those elite on and off ice habits that, you know, Quinn has, for example, being a little bit harder to play against, being the type of player that come playoff time, when the pressure's on, there's a big moment, you're down in a series, let's say, are you going to be the guy who elevates his game and puts the team on his back? Or do you wilt under that pressure, under that spotlight, like Pettersson sort of did it during last year's playoffs? are you going to be the type of go-to leader that can actually inspire teammates? Because when you look at, like, Quinn Hughes does that, but also look around the league, the impact of players like McKinnon and McDavid isn't just, oh, they're superstar guys that put up 1 million points a year. It's, they are so dialed and so locked in, and this obviously extends to Sidney Crosby as well, that the standard that sets for the rest of the team and how hard you have to work if you're a third liner on that team to elevate your game to live up to that standard, it just raises your team's ceiling as a whole. And I think those are the areas that when they talk about Pettersson being a more complete player, I think it's a lot more about those qualities than, oh, he's a defensive liability, because quite clearly he's a sound defensive player, but those other areas are where we all still have concerns about his ability to be a franchise guy. And notice, none of those things are related to talent. Talent is not the concern with Pettersson at this stage. The other thing, even in relation to the defensive side, this is a point that Drancer and I sort of talked about at the conclusion of the availability as well. It is notable that despite being a pretty good defensive player, that he's had 3 NHL coaches at this point: Travis Green, Bruce Boudreau, Rick Tocchet. Mm-hmm. None of them have trusted him head-to-head against top competition.
Really good point.
Even when JT was traded, I thought, okay, there's no way that they're going to turn to anybody else but PD to go head-to-head, take on the toughest defensive assignments, go power on power against top guys. First weekend back, they had Pia Suter going up against Nathan McKinnon and Dylan Larkin.
And it worked.
Not really. But that's notable too. And I think that speaks to he's got to be stronger on his feet, and he's got to elevate some of these intangible parts of his game so that, like, if it was just one coach, you could say, oh, dinosaur coach.
Yeah, sure.
Right? He's a good defensive player. Why aren't you doing it? But we're talking about 3 NHL coaches, and keep in mind, Bruce loved Petey.
Yeah, different styles too, all 3 of those guys. Anything else you want to get in today? We've got a full week ahead of us.
Yeah, I'm going to look through. We'll go a lot deeper on Demko tomorrow, I'm thinking. Those were probably the main takeaways for me.
Beauty. Let's get to our Bet365. Bet of the day. Playoffs tonight, Harm. The Montreal Canadiens are somehow underdogs against the Washington Capitals. Don't know why. We're taking Canadiens money line to stun the Caps and take game 1 of this series on the road. You can get the Canadiens money line at plus 160 over on Bet365, where every nail-biting overtime win is a barn burner, every face-off, hat-trick, power play, shot on goal, penalty shot, and every suspenseful minute in between is amazing. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, an official partner of the NHL. Download the Bet365 app and use the code NATION to get in on the game. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right, I think we'll close it out there. We'll be back tomorrow, back Wednesday. Get your Family Feud responses in. We need them. We're going to play on Wednesday. I think no show Thursday. So get your Family Feud responses in. Happy Easter. Get your Family Feud responses in. But we will close it out there. For my co-host, Harmon Dial, and our technical producer, Jacob Bazar. My name is Dave Virgilli. Thanks so much for this episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.